I welcome you to my channel. Subscribe and listen to my new stories every day. Friday night had always been a time of quiet relaxation for me. After a long week of work, I like to sit back, enjoy a beer, and maybe watch a movie. But that particular Friday was different. It began like any other, nothing special. My wife, Sarah, was going out with some friends after work. She'd done it before, so it wasn't unusual. But still, something felt off. As I watched her get ready that evening, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at my gut. She seemed different. Not in a way that I could point out to anyone else, but in the way that only someone who had been married for over a decade would notice. Her smile was a little too forced, her laugh a bit too high-pitched, and she spent more time on her appearance than usual. I brushed it off as paranoia at first. After all, Sarah had always been beautiful, tall, with dark hair and an athletic build that had kept heads turning even after 2 kids. Maybe I was just being insecure. "You sure you're okay with this?" she asked, slipping her earrings in, standing in front of the bedroom mirror. Her reflection caught my eye, and I nodded. "Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I be?" I answered, forcing a casual tone into my voice. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Okay, I'll be back late, don't wait up." I didn't respond as she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Something in me wanted to stop her, to ask her to stay. But what would that solve? We'd been married for 12 years, and we had always trusted each other. Or at least, I thought we did. I didn't want to be that paranoid, jealous husband. That wasn't who I was. Or was it? As the door clicked shut behind her, I stared at the space she left behind, the air still thick with the scent of her perfume. I sat on the couch, beer in hand, flipping through channels without really watching anything. My mind kept drifting back to Sarah, wondering what she was doing and who she was with. I hated myself for thinking it, but the doubt wouldn't leave. There was something off about tonight, and I could feel it deep down in my bones. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping me out of my thoughts. I leaned forward and grabbed it, hoping for a distraction. But it wasn't a text from one of the guys, or even a work email. No, it was a message from Sarah. Her phone had been left behind on the couch. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. It was wrong, I knew it, but curiosity and suspicion got the better of me. A part of me hoped I was just being ridiculous and that I'd find nothing unusual. But deep down, I already knew that wasn't going to happen. As I unlocked her phone, a message popped up almost instantly. A name I didn't recognize, Nick. My stomach tightened, my throat dried up. I opened the text. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was incredible." The words swam in front of my eyes, but I couldn't look away. It felt like the world had shifted under my feet, like I was floating outside of my own body. The sinking feeling that had been gnawing at me all evening now roared into full-blown realization. There it was, confirmation. My wife, Sarah, was cheating on me. I set the phone down slowly, my hands trembling. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, the ticking of the clock in the living room becoming deafening. This wasn't happening. Not to me, not to us. We had a family, a home, 2 kids. We had built this life together. How could she throw it all away? I didn't confront her that night. No, I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I let the anger settle into a cold, simmering rage, calculating my next steps. Confrontation wouldn't be enough, not for me. Sarah had betrayed me, and I needed to make sure she felt the weight of her choices. I wasn't going to lose everything without a fight. The following days were spent in careful observation. I kept up appearances, smiling when she was around, acting like everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I looked at her, all I could think about was that text from Nick. Her cheerful tone, her casual laughter, it all grated on me like nails on a chalkboard. I began checking her phone more frequently, finding more texts, more evidence. They hadn't just met a few times, this affair had been going on for months. There were photos of them together, receipts from dinners, even a hotel room she'd paid for. Every new discovery was a punch to the gut, but it also fueled the fire inside me. One night, as she lay sleeping next to me, I scrolled through her messages again. She had started using a more discreet app for their conversations, but it didn't matter. I had already seen enough. My heart hammered in my chest as I scrolled through the details of their plans to meet at some hotel on Friday night while I was supposed to be out of town for work. I had thought about confronting her before, but now, I knew I couldn't just call her out. I had to do something more. This wasn't just about the affair anymore, it was about taking back control of my life. I had been played for a fool, but I wasn't going to be humiliated. I needed to hit her where it hurt. Revenge wasn't something I had ever imagined for myself. I always saw myself as a calm, reasonable person. But betrayal has a way of warping your perspective. As I stared at her sleeping figure beside me, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her in some heated argument. No, I was going to dismantle her world piece by piece, just like she had done to mine. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. It wasn't complicated, but it was effective. First, I opened a separate bank account. Over the course of the next few weeks, I quietly moved our savings into it, transferring small amounts at a time so she wouldn't notice. I wasn't going to let her take half of everything we had built together. Next, I met with a lawyer. I had already gathered more than enough evidence of her affair to secure full custody of our kids and, most importantly, our home. The house was in both our names, but I wasn't about to let her take that from me too. I made sure that when the time came, she'd be left with nothing but the clothes on her back. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine. Sarah, in her obliviousness, didn't notice a thing. She went about her days as usual, continuing her affair with Nick while playing the role of the doting wife and mother at home. But the clock was ticking, and she had no idea. Finally, the day arrived. I had set everything up perfectly. It was Friday night, the night she was planning to meet Nick at the hotel. She didn't know I was supposed to be home early from my work trip. She had no idea what was coming. That evening, I cooked dinner for the kids, played with them, and acted like the loving husband. When Sarah came home from work, she was distracted, her mind clearly elsewhere. I smiled at her, made her a drink, and waited for the perfect moment. After we put the kids to bed, I casually asked her how her day had been. She answered in that same, rehearsed way she always did when she was lying. I let her talk, all the while knowing exactly where she was planning to be in a few hours. Sarah left the house that night with a light kiss on my cheek, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I watched her walk out the door, a strange mixture of rage and cold satisfaction boiling inside me. It was finally time to bring everything to the surface. Tonight, she would learn just how much I knew. After she was gone, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the clock. She had said she wouldn't be home until late, but I knew exactly where she was headed. I had tracked her plans, her hotel reservations, even the time she told Nick she'd arrive. The truth was all laid out, and I was ready to pull the trigger. I didn't follow her right away. No, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I waited, letting the minutes pass like slow drips of water, each one building the tension in my chest. My kids were sound asleep upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing below them. Part of me hated that they would be caught in the crossfire, but another part knew it was inevitable. Sarah had torn our family apart the moment she chose him over us. By the time I got in my car, it was nearly 10 p.m. The streets were quiet, the soft hum of streetlights casting long shadows over the empty roads. As I drove, my mind raced with all the possible outcomes. Would she deny everything when I confronted her? Would she break down in tears, beg for forgiveness? Or would she keep lying, even when I had the proof in my hand? The hotel was only a 20-minute drive from our house, tucked away in a quiet part of town. A small, boutique place that was just private enough for an affair, but not so expensive that it would raise suspicion. I had passed it a few times before, never thinking twice about it. Now, it felt like the epicenter of my world crumbling down around me. I parked a block away, not wanting to risk her seeing my car. The adrenaline coursing through my veins made my hands tremble slightly as I checked the room number one more time. Room 304. I could already picture them in there together, laughing, drinking, doing things I didn't even want to think about. As I made my way to the hotel entrance, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at it, another message from Sarah. She was really playing the part tonight. "Hey, honey. I'll probably be back really late, don't wait up." I smirked, the bitterness almost choking me. I shoved the phone back into my pocket and walked through the hotel's sliding doors. The lobby was dimly lit, quiet. There was a woman at the front desk, but she barely glanced up as I walked past her toward the elevators. The place had the kind of anonymous atmosphere where no one asked questions, perfect for people like Sarah and Nick. I stepped into the elevator, my heart pounding in my chest. Room 304. I kept repeating it in my head like a mantra, as if saying it enough times would prepare me for what I was about to see. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the third floor, and the doors slid open. The hallway was empty, the kind of eerie silence that made every footstep echo. I walked slowly, deliberately, trying to keep myself calm. When I reached room 304, I paused for a moment, my hand hovering over the door. This was it, the moment of truth. I raised my fist and knocked. At first, there was no answer. I could hear faint murmurs from inside, the low hum of conversation, and then footsteps approaching the door. My heart raced as the doorknob turned, and the door swung open. Nick stood there, his face contorting from confusion to shock in a matter of seconds. He wasn't expecting me. Of course, he wasn't. His shirt was unbuttoned, his hair tousled as if they'd just been lying in bed. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Sarah, her face pale as she realized what was happening. "Mark, what are you doing here?" she stammered, stepping forward. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, staring at them, letting the silence do most of the talking. I could see the panic in Sarah's eyes, the way she was already trying to figure out how to spin this, how to salvage what little dignity she thought she had left. "I think you know exactly why I'm here," I said finally, my voice low and cold. "I think you've known for a while that this moment was coming." Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. I wasn't interested in her excuses, her lies. I had heard enough of them. "How long?" I asked, my eyes flicking back and forth between her and Nick. "How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward Nick, as if he would have something to say, something that could explain this all away. But Nick was useless. He stood there, frozen in place, looking like he wanted to be anywhere but here. I stepped further into the room, closing the door behind me with a soft click. Sarah took a step back, her hands trembling at her sides. The room was small, barely enough space for a bed and a desk, but the tension inside made it feel suffocating. "I asked you a question," I said, my voice sharper now. "How long?" Sarah's lip quivered. "Mark, please." Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare try to make excuses. Just tell me the truth for once in your life." She hesitated for a moment, then looked down at the floor. "A few months," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I felt my fists clench at my sides. Months. They had been doing this for months, right under my nose. I should have seen it sooner, should have done something. But instead, I had trusted her. I had been a fool. "And you," I turned to Nick, who flinched slightly. "What did you think? That you could just come into my life, take what's mine, and I wouldn't find out. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His face said it all, guilt, shame, and fear. "Get out," I said quietly. "Both of you." Sarah looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Mark, we need to talk about this." "No," I interrupted. "There's nothing to talk about. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." "I'm done." Nick was already scrambling to grab his things, eager to get out of the room and as far away from me as possible. I didn't stop him. The sight of him made my skin crawl, and I didn't care what happened to him. He could go back to his pathetic life for all I cared. Sarah stayed frozen in place, her eyes brimming with tears. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back before she could. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't mean for this to happen." I shook my head slowly. "It's too late for that. You can keep your apologies. I don't want them." She broke down then, collapsing onto the bed as sobs racked her body. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She had done this to herself, and I wasn't going to clean up her mess. "I'll be filing for divorce on Monday," I said, my voice steady. "You can keep the house. I don't need it." She looked up, her face streaked with tears. "What about the kids? What about us?" "There is no us anymore," I replied coldly. "You killed that the moment you decided to cheat on me." With that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her sobbing behind me. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. The truth was out, and I had done what I needed to do. But the revenge wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I drove home in a haze, my mind reeling from the confrontation. The hotel room, Sarah's tears, the look of pure panic on her face, it all played in an endless loop in my head. The anger had started to simmer down, replaced by a hollow emptiness in my chest. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed her, confronted her with her lies, and ripped her little affair wide open. But it didn't feel like I had imagined it would. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. The kids were still asleep, and for that, I was grateful. They didn't need to see this side of their parents, the collapse of a marriage, the betrayal, the raw emotions. I sat in the car for a few moments, staring at the front door, trying to collect myself. I wasn't ready to walk inside just yet. Not after everything that had just happened. For years, that house had been a sanctuary for us, a place where we built our family and shared our lives. Now, it felt like a hollow shell, a stage where the most painful act of my life had just played out. I knew it was only a matter of time before Sarah came home, and the reality of the situation settled in. But right now, I just needed some space to think. After a few minutes, I got out of the car and walked inside. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I moved through the darkened living room, my footsteps soft on the hardwood floor, and made my way to the kitchen. I poured myself a drink, something strong to numb the storm brewing in my chest. I leaned against the counter, staring out the window into the dark yard. Everything looked so peaceful outside, as if the world hadn't just crumbled beneath my feet. But inside, my mind was racing. What now? I had confronted Sarah, told her I was filing for divorce. But what came after that? What happened to our kids, to the life we had built together? The questions piled up, one after another, but I didn't have any answers. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in this house much longer, not with her. I couldn't pretend that things would ever go back to the way they were. Too much damage had been done. I drained my glass and set it down on the counter, rubbing my eyes with the heel of my hand. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. I wanted to sleep, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. My mind was too restless, too raw from everything I had just been through. The sound of the front door opening made me tense up. I didn't have to look to know it was Sarah. She had come home, probably hoping for some kind of resolution, some final plea for forgiveness. But she wasn't going to get it. Not from me. I heard her footsteps pause in the hallway, and then she appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. She looked like a wreck, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her hair disheveled, and her face pale. For a moment, she just stood there, as if unsure of what to say. "Mark," she began, her voice small and shaky. "Can we talk?" I didn't look at her. I couldn't. I wasn't ready for another round of apologies, excuses, or tears. "There's nothing left to talk about, Sarah," I said, my voice cold. "I've already said everything I needed to." She took a tentative step forward. "Please, just hear me out." I sighed and turned to face her. "Fine. Go ahead. Say whatever you want to say." She hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts, and then she began to speak. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted things to get this far." I clenched my jaw, biting back the bitter retort that was on the tip of my tongue. I had heard this all before, the same excuses, the same hollow words. She didn't want to hurt me, but she had. She had destroyed everything we had built together, and now she wanted to make it right with a few tearful apologies. "I was lonely," she continued, her voice cracking. "I felt like you weren't there for me anymore. You were always so busy with work, with everything else. I felt neglected." I shook my head, disgusted. "So that's your excuse? I was working too much, so you decided to have an affair?" She flinched at the harshness of my words. "It wasn't just that. It was more than that. I felt like we were drifting apart. I didn't know how to fix it." "And you thought sleeping with someone else would fix it?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Is that how you deal with problems, Sarah? By running to another man?" Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. I was done feeling sorry for her. "I made a mistake," she sobbed. "A terrible mistake. I know that. But please, Mark, don't throw everything away. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can." "Stop," I interrupted, holding up my hand. "Just stop. You think this can be fixed? After what you did? After months of lying and sneaking around behind my back? Do you honestly think we can just go to counseling and pretend none of this ever happened?" She was shaking now, her whole body trembling as she stood in the middle of the kitchen, pleading with me. But I wasn't moved. I had already made up my mind. "I told you, it's over," I said, my voice firm. "I'm filing for divorce. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." Sarah collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table, burying her face in her hands as sobs racked her body. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. We had been married for so long, shared so much. But then I reminded myself of everything she had done, every lie, every betrayal. She didn't deserve my sympathy. "I'll stay with the kids," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You can figure out where you want to go. But I'm not leaving." She didn't respond. She just sat there, her shoulders shaking with the force of her sobs. I turned away, unable to watch her anymore. I had heard enough. "I'm going to bed," I muttered, heading for the stairs. "You can sleep on the couch." I didn't wait for her reply. I walked upstairs, my body heavy with exhaustion. As I reached the top of the stairs, I glanced toward the kids' rooms. They were still sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm raging below them. I slipped into our bedroom, no, my bedroom now, and closed the door behind me. The room felt colder than usual, emptier. I sat down on the edge of the bed, running my hands through my hair, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. It wasn't long before the weight of everything crashed down on me. The anger, the betrayal, the sheer exhaustion of holding it all together. I laid back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, feeling the tight knot in my chest grow tighter. I had done what I needed to do. I had confronted her, made my decision, and started the process of taking back control of my life. But as I lay there in the dark, the reality of what had just happened hit me with full force. My marriage was over. The life we had built together was gone, shattered by her betrayal. And despite everything, despite the anger and the cold satisfaction of exposing her, I still felt the sting of loss deep in my bones. I had loved Sarah once. I had built my life around her. And now, all of that was gone. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the thoughts swirling in my head. Sleep didn't come easily, but eventually, exhaustion won out. I drifted off into a restless sleep, knowing that the worst was yet to come. The next few days were a blur. Sarah moved out temporarily, staying with her sister, while I remained in the house with the kids. I hadn't filed for divorce yet, but I was determined to go through with it. There was no coming back from what she had done, and no amount of apologies or therapy could fix the wreckage she'd left behind. But life goes on, doesn't it? Even when you feel like your world has fallen apart, the rest of it keeps moving. The kids still had to go to school, bills still needed to be paid, and work kept demanding my attention. Every time I dropped off or picked up the kids from school, I forced myself to smile, pretending that everything was normal. But at night, when the house was quiet, the loneliness crept in. It was strange how the absence of someone you once loved could feel like a physical ache. Even though I had made up my mind, there was a hollow space inside me that nothing seemed to fill. I told myself it would get easier over time. It had to. One night, a few days after Sarah left, I found myself sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone without much purpose. The kids were asleep, and the house was quiet, too quiet. My mind wandered back to everything that had happened, the betrayal, the confrontation, and the bitter words we'd exchanged. I couldn't stop thinking about it, replaying the scenes in my head, over and over. Part of me wondered if I should have handled things differently, but every time that doubt crept in, I reminded myself of what she had done. There was no going back. I had already made my choice. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed with a notification. A text message, but not from anyone I expected. The number was unfamiliar. I frowned and opened the message. Meet me at the park. 11 p.m. You need to know the truth. My heart skipped a beat. Who was this? What truth? I glanced at the clock on the wall, it was already 10:45. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, chalk it up to a prank or something meant for someone else. But something about the tone of the message felt unsettlingly direct. Could this be related to Sarah? To everything that had happened? Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my coat and left the house, quietly closing the door behind me. The kids would be fine, they were fast asleep, and I'd be back soon. I needed to know what this was about. The park wasn't far from our house, a small neighborhood park with a few benches, a playground, and a couple of tall oak trees that cast long shadows in the dim light of the street lamps. When I arrived, the park was empty, save for one figure sitting on a bench under the largest tree. As I got closer, I recognized him. Nick. The man who had torn my life apart. The man who had been sleeping with my wife. I stopped in my tracks, my fists clenching at my sides. What the hell was he doing here? And why had he asked me to come? I was ready to turn around and leave, but something in his expression stopped me. He didn't look cocky or smug like I'd expected. He looked scared. Mark, he said quietly as I approached, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm glad you came. Why are you here? I demanded, my voice cold. What do you want? Nick stood up, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. He glanced around nervously, as if someone might be watching. You don't know the full story, he said, his eyes flicking back to mine. And you deserve to know. I scoffed, crossing my arms. I know enough. You slept with my wife, and now my marriage is over. What more could there possibly be? He shook his head, taking a step closer. It's not what you think, Mark. Sarah and we made a mistake, but it's not just that. There's something else going on. I narrowed my eyes, unsure if I should even listen to him. What are you talking about? Nick took a deep breath. It wasn't just an affair. Sarah didn't just fall for me out of nowhere. She was being blackmailed. My stomach dropped. What? He nodded, his face pale. There's someone else, Mark. Someone who found out about the affair and has been using it to control her. It's why she couldn't tell you the truth, why she couldn't leave. She's been trying to protect you and the kids. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Who? I demanded. Who's blackmailing her? Nick hesitated for a moment, glancing around the park again before he leaned in closer. Jack Edwards, he whispered. Your boss. I took a step back, the world spinning around me. Jack. My boss. The man I had worked with for years. It didn't make any sense. Why would Jack blackmail her? Why would he care about her affair? Nick's expression darkened. Because it's not just about the affair, Mark. Jack's been using the company to cover up his illegal activities, money laundering, embezzlement, and worse. Sarah found out about it, and he's been threatening her ever since. If she didn't keep quiet, he was going to ruin her, ruin you, and take everything from your family. I shook my head, unable to process what I was hearing. No, this can't be true. It is, Nick said quietly. I only found out recently. I tried to get Sarah to come clean, but she was too scared. She thought if she just kept Jack happy, everything would blow over. But it's gotten worse. Jack's closing in on her. He's planning to expose everything, and when he does, it won't just be her who goes down. It'll be you too. I stood there, stunned, my mind racing. Everything I thought I knew had just been flipped upside down. The affair, the betrayal, it had all been part of something much bigger, something I never saw coming. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice hoarse. Why didn't you say anything before? Nick looked down at his feet. Because I was scared too. I didn't want to get caught up in it. But I can't live with myself knowing what's about to happen. You deserve to know the truth before it's too late. I stood there, trying to make sense of everything, trying to decide what to do next. I had been ready to cut Sarah out of my life, to move on without her. But now I wasn't sure. If Nick was telling the truth, then Sarah had been caught in something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Sarah. Mark, I need to talk to you. Please come home. It's urgent. I looked up at Nick, who gave me a solemn nod. Go, he said. You need to hear it from her. I didn't wait any longer. I turned and ran back to my car, my heart pounding in my chest. Everything was unraveling faster than I could process, but I needed answers. I needed to hear Sarah's side of the story. When I arrived back at the house, Sarah was waiting for me on the porch. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She stood up as I approached, her hands shaking. Mark, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. There's something I need to tell you. I already knew what it was. But hearing it from her made it all the more real. I've been trying to protect you, she said, tears streaming down her face. Jack, he's dangerous. I didn't know what else to do. As she explained everything, Jack's threats, the blackmail, the fear that had consumed her, I felt my anger dissolve into something else. Something deeper. I realized that Sarah hadn't just betrayed me. She had been trying to protect me, to protect our family from something far worse than an affair. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, reaching out to take my hand. "I never wanted to hurt you." I stood there, torn between the anger I had held onto for so long and the new understanding that had settled in my chest. The truth was messy, complicated, and far from what I had imagined. But in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over yet. And Jack Edwards was about to pay for everything he had done.